Before you scroll away, listen carefully, because what I'm about to say might explain something you've been feeling but could never fully put into words. That strange pull, that quiet memory, that person who still shows up in your thoughts when everything else in your life has moved on. It is not random. And by the end of this, you may finally understand whether it means something is unfinished or something inside you is simply trying to heal in a deeper way than you realized. Welcome to Decoder's Mind, where we uncover the hidden psychology behind love, emotions, and the thoughts you can't always explain. In today's video, we're exploring those silent emotional signs that make someone stay in your thoughts, the deep connection you can't easily move on from, and what it really means when a bond still feels alive even after time and distance. That feeling has a pattern.
It doesn't always mean weakness, Doc. It doesn't always mean attachment, Doc. Sometimes it simply means your inner world has registered that this connection still holds meaning on a deeper level. And when two people are truly aligned in a certain way, life has a strange habit of showing early signals before anything changes in the real world. Doc, these signs are not loud. They don't come with announcements. They appear in silence, in thoughts, in emotions, in growth, and in timing that doesn't always make logical sense. So stay with me, because what you'll hear next might feel uncomfortably familiar, and the last sign is the one most people completely overlook.
If this person has been on your mind lately without a clear reason, then maybe this is not random. Maybe you're hearing this at the exact moment you needed to. There's a reason this person sits differently in your memory compared to others. Most people fade with time. Their faces become distant, their names stop carrying weight, and their presence slowly dissolves into the background of your life. But this one person didn't fade the same way. Even with distance, even with silence, even with all the logical reasons you gave yourself to move on, they still feel present in some quiet corner of your mind. Not like an open wound, not like something painful you keep reopening, but more like an unfinished thought, like a sentence that never got its final word, like a moment in a song that ended too early yet still echoes in the room. And that can feel confusing because you might have done everything right. You might have accepted what happened.
You might have tried to let go. You might even believe you have moved on. But deep connections don't always follow clean endings. Sometimes they pause instead of ending. Sometimes they go quiet instead of disappearing. That's why this person can show up in your thoughts at the most ordinary times. When you're not trying, when you're distracted, late at night, during random quiet moments in your day.
It rises on its own, without invitation. And that matters more than you think, because what feels random on the surface is often something deeper trying to be noticed. The first thing that often happens when a connection still holds meaning is this: the silence between you doesn't feel completely empty. Most people assume that time automatically weakens everything. They think distance means detachment and silence means the end. But real emotional bonds don't always behave that way. There is a type of silence that feels finished, cold, clear, final. And then there is another type, a silence that still feels alive in some invisible way. A silence that doesn't feel empty, but full of something unspoken. Like something is still there, even though nothing is being said. If you've felt that, you already understand what I mean. You can be surrounded by people, responsibilities, noise, and daily life, but still feel the presence of that one person in the quiet background of your thoughts. It often shows up in moments when everything slows down, right before sleep, right after waking up, during a random walk or drive, in a completely normal second where suddenly, without warning, they cross your mind again. That doesn't automatically mean you're stuck. It doesn't mean you're failing to move forward. Sometimes it simply means this person was stored deeper in your emotional memory than others. Some people live in surface memory.
Others get stored in emotional layers that are tied to feeling, identity, and experience. That quotes why they don't just fade away in the same way.
And that's why silence doesn't always feel like absence. Now stay with this, because the next part is where things become harder to ignore. The second sign is a quiet pull. You're not forcing anything. You're not chasing anything. You're not even trying to think about them. And yet there is a subtle pull in their direction. Something reminds you of them unexpectedly. A name, a place, a conversation, a situation. You stop yourself from reaching out, but the thought returns later even stronger. You dream about them without planning to. You feel their presence in unrelated moments. You think of them in places they've never even been. And what's interesting is that this pull doesn't always feel emotional in a dramatic way. It often feels calm, familiar, almost natural, like your mind is simply returning to something it recognizes. It doesn't scream, it doesn't demand, it just stays there quietly. And when something stays without force, it usually means it's rooted deeper than surface level thought. Psychologically speaking, emotionally meaningful people are not stored like ordinary memories. Some fade quickly because they were never deeply imprinted, but others connect with emotion, identity, and the nervous system itself. This is why certain silences feel heavy with meaning instead of emptiness. They carry history, they carry emotion, they carry something unresolved or still emotionally active. And if you've ever felt that strange quiet, where nothing is happening, yet something inside you still feels connected, don't dismiss it too quickly, because not all silence means ending. Sometimes it's just a pause before life shifts again. The third sign is the most important one, and it often gets missed completely. It's personal growth. Because if a connection truly has depth, time apart doesn't just separate two people, it changes them. Distance is not always punishment. Sometimes it's preparation. It creates space for reflection, healing, and awareness. Space to understand yourself in ways you couldn't see while you were still inside the same emotional cycle. During that time, something quiet may have been changing in you. You may have started noticing your emotional patterns more clearly. You may have learned to set boundaries. You may have stopped abandoning your own needs just to maintain peace. You may have begun to understand the difference between attachment and real love. You may have started seeing yourself more honestly. And that kind of growth is not random, because when a connection is meaningful, life doesn't always just erase it. Sometimes it reshapes the people involved first. And that is where things begin to shift in ways most people don't notice until much later. It prepares you to meet it in a completely different way.
So if you've noticed yourself becoming calmer, more grounded, more self-aware, and more emotionally steady, then pay attention to this. Because what might feel like the ending of one chapter could actually be the beginning of a version of the story that finally has the chance to last.
Think back to who you were when this connection first started. Think about what you tolerated back then, what you were afraid of, and what you didn't yet understand about yourself. Maybe you mistook intensity for security. Maybe you gave too much too quickly. Maybe you stayed quiet when you should have spoken up. Maybe you held on so tightly that you slowly lost parts of yourself along the way. Or maybe it went the other way. Maybe you held back. Maybe you cared deeply but didn't know how to express it without fear. Maybe both of you had real feelings, but neither of you were emotionally ready to handle them in a healthy way. And that's exactly why growth matters. Because when two people are meant to cross paths again in a better way, the time apart doesn't just separate them, it reshapes them. It turns you into people who can finally meet without repeating the same patterns that once caused the break. You become less reactive, more aware,
More honest. More capable of loving without turning it into control, fear, or self-abandonment.
And if the other person is also growing in their own way, then what once collapsed through confusion may one day have the clarity it needed all along. That's why you should never treat your healing like something secondary. It is not a side chapter. It is the bridge between what hurt you and what might still become possible for you. And if that truth is settling in you right now, then listen closely, because there is something even more important than the signs themselves. It is what those signs are actually pointing you toward, your value. You deserve a love that can come back with honesty, not confusion. You deserve a connection that doesn't erase your worth just because it once went silent. So many people measure themselves through the wrong things. Who stayed, who left, who returned, who didn't choose them at the right time. But your worth was never created by someone else's timing.
It was never built on their readiness, their fear, or their confusion.
And it was never reduced by distance or silence either. If someone couldn't choose you clearly at a certain point, that doesn't automatically mean you were too much. It doesn't mean you were wrong. It simply means the timing, the capacity, or the emotional readiness wasn't aligned in that moment. And that's a very different thing from your value. Because what often happens when people hear messages like this is that they turn it into waiting to be chosen, waiting to be proven right, waiting for one specific person to return and validate everything. But that is not the lesson here. The real lesson is this: meaningful connections are never meant to make you shrink while you hope. They are meant to bring you into a stronger version of yourself while you live. So yes, if something is truly meant to reconnect, signs may appear. But those signs are not instructions to abandon your life or lose yourself in anticipation. They are reminders that what is real will never require you to become less in order to be chosen. And this is where most people misunderstand everything. Being open to a possibility is not the same as putting your entire life on pause. Feeling someone deeply is not the same as waiting endlessly for them. You can hold a memory in your heart and still move forward. You can feel a pull and still choose peace. You can acknowledge unfinished emotion without turning your present into a waiting room. The strongest place you can stand is this: if this connection is truly meant to return, it will meet you in a version of yourself that is stronger, calmer, and more aligned than before. Not a version of you stuck in old pain or old patterns. And most importantly, ask yourself whether you are holding on to a person or to a feeling that helped you discover something about yourself, because those are not always the same thing. And when you understand that difference, everything becomes clearer. Real connection doesn't just pull you towards someone else. It pulls you back into your own depth. It forces you to see your truth more clearly. It teaches you what you can no longer ignore about love, boundaries, and self-respect. And if this message is reaching something inside you right now, then don't dismiss that feeling. Not with urgency, not with fantasy, but with calm awareness. Because sometimes the heart understands things long before life shows any proof. And sometimes the most important shifts begin quietly, long before anything changes on the outside. You are not weak for feeling deeply. You are not lost because something still lives in your heart. And you are not behind because you haven't fully moved on in the way others expect. And everything else begins from there. In the end, this is not about chasing signs or waiting for certainty. It is about understanding yourself more deeply. Some connections leave a lasting imprint on your heart, not always because they are meant to return, but because they changed you in ways you cannot ignore. The silence, the memories, and the pull you feel are often reflections of that impact. not instructions to stop living your life. Real growth is what truly matters here, because as you heal, evolve, and become more grounded in who you are, you either become ready for a healthier version of that connection, or you reach peace and clarity without it. So don't lose yourself in waiting. Don't shrink your life for uncertainty. Keep growing, keep living, and keep choosing your own peace, because what is truly meant for you will never require you to abandon yourself to find it. If this message resonated with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon on Decoder's Mind so you never miss what comes next. And if you truly felt this on a deeper level, comment the word unfinished below, because some stories don't end, they just evolve.